Good afternoon, STCC faculty and staff, friends, community members, and little ones who are nearby. My name is Vanetta Lightfoot, and I am the Multicultural Affairs Operations Manager here at STCC. On behalf of the Office of Multicultural Affairs, I would like to welcome you here today and thank you for participating in the Heart of a Man series in today's session entitled Heartspace, a dialogue with Frederick Joseph. This is a new session we've created for this series, and it's an intimate conversation spotlighting the voices of nationally known speakers who will share their stories and engage in dialogue on topics of identity, gender stereotypes, interpersonal violence, race, politics, and social justice. In this session, we will feature Frederick Joseph, an award-winning author, activist, philanthropist, and marketing professional. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to my team, Cindy, James, and John, for helping me to realize my vision for this session and for all the hard work and dedication that is put into each and every session in this series. It is a pleasure to work with you all, and thank you so much for your support. I also want to thank Frederick for agreeing to do this without hesitation, and I'm so excited for what he will bring to the conversation. So thank you so much. Now I would like to introduce my co-creator, my colleague, and my friend, Cindy Brunig, to share more about #StickWeCan and to introduce our moderator.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy Brunig, and I am Project Director for STCC's Support and Advocacy for Everyone, or SAFE project. And this is supported by an Office of Violence Against Women Campus Program grant. The SAFE project seeks to strengthen both prevention and response to dating violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking through both campus and community partnerships. #StickWeCan is an initiative of the SAFE project and seeks to create an engaged campus community where each and every one of us can do our part to prevent sexual and relationship violence. We deeply believe that men, as both survivors and allies, play a critical role as leaders in the work to end these forms of violence, and that together we can be the change we want to see in the world. With all that said, it is now my honor to introduce you to our moderator for today, James Lightfoot III. James is currently the coordinator of academic advising at STCC. He is also an advocate, a consultant, and a mentor for youth and young adult males in programs. We now hand it off to you, James. I'm back. Let's hold off a second while we wait for James. Oh, here we go. Hello, James.
Hello, and thank you for that introduction, Cindy. I was having a little technical difficulty here, but we're here. So thank you again, and good afternoon, everyone who is with us. Joining us today for this very special series of Heart of a Man. It's a great honor to welcome back to our campus, Mr. Frederick Joseph, and I'm excited to be able to have this dialogue with him today. I am looking forward to it being very rich and meaningful, and hopefully, folks who are watching will get some nuggets of information or some insight that will help them in whatever work they're looking to do from this point forward. All right. So before we begin, I would like to go over the format of our session. As if you've watched Heart of a Man in the past, very similar, except smaller cast or lineup. So we will begin in this webinar format, which means your video and audio will be disabled. You may want to adjust your viewing settings to gallery view so that you'll be able to see myself and Frederick on the screen during our conversation. Otherwise, you'll get to see one of our handsome faces individually. One may not be speaking at the time. All right. This session will not include an audience Q&A, but we do encourage you to show some love in the chat with our guests throughout our conversation today. So with all that said, I'd like to invite Frederick to the Heartspace.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Great. So before we get started, I do have some questions that I will ask today. Just want to see how you feeling today.
You know, it's been a day. My heart was heavy. I just got a notification a second ago while you were speaking that I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the Julius Jones case, but Julius Jones has been granted clemency and he will not face, execution. So, I just want to take a second to say that and abolish the death penalty. So,
Yes.
so yeah, that's what's on my heart at the moment and what I've been thinking about.
Good, good. And a lot of lifted weight from probably some of our viewers and in the community. So, thanks for sharing that for those of us that are not tuned in to our local or national news network at the moment. So take a deep breath and let's get into this. That's a huge sigh of relief. I've been waiting to see how that's going to come about.
Yep.
All right. So as we enter Heartspace today, we want to get to know a little bit more about you, and throughout we'll hear a little bit more about, the very important work you do and what you stand for and kind of what that meaning that you bring to this great life you live. But starting off, how has your personal story informed the man that you are today? And with that, what challenges have you faced and how have you overcome them?
Ooh, that's I like, that's a real dense question. That's the meaty one. I think the challenges I've faced have written my entire stories thus far, right? I grew up a Black kid who became a Black man in America. That's a sentence in of itself that's super loaded, right, for everybody. But me specifically, I grew up in poverty. My story is informed by the stories of, the people who came before me. I'm a descendant of, my grandmother whose first husband was lynched by the Ku Klux Klan. And they escaped the South and came up to New York. And generationally, my family has lived in municipal housing, right? I was born in the projects, and I have clawed my way out of the projects. So that's a major part of my story, and a major part of my work is progress, right? As I've tried to progress in my life, I've tried to pull every single person in every single community that I can with me, right? I think I've been blessed to have an ever-growing intersectional lens on most of the issues that I've faced, most of the issues that we face as a society, and that's because of the injection, for the most part, of the Black women who have been in my life, my mother, like I said, my grandmother, my aunts, my fiance, so on and so forth. So, it informs everything about me, and I'm trying to create a more liberated world, honestly, for them, because they've done everything in their power to create a more liberated world for me.
Excellent. Good. Thank you for kicking that one off for us, and bringing in all the other parties of your community. I think that's important, and what I've shared in other conversations I have with people, right? Like, who else is with you, right? Yeah. You didn't come into this alone.
Yeah.
And so very important to identify them.
Yeah.
So we're going to switch a little bit and talk about modeling of behaviors. And so really talking about like modeling healthy masculinity. So what does it mean? You're a public figure, have several works of that you probably speak to towards the end of this, but some books that you've written or authored. So as a public figure, to model both vulnerability, what does it mean to model vulnerability and strength, healthy relationships, and then healthy masculinity on top of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's one of the most important things that I can do, right? It's not lost on me when I wake up in the morning. if I put out, you know, a tweet, let's say, or I post something on Instagram, I can post something on Instagram and have 100,000 people see it that morning, right? That's not lost to me because I spent so long like clamoring to get a voice because of how often, you know, Black and brown people's voices are silenced, right? So I feel divinely favored to have a voice and for that voice to mean something. So I try to model in the way that I use my voice, in the way that I use my platform, how I want my future children to use their voice, whether it's on a grand level or just in the household. I try to model you know, the voices of the people whose shoulders I stand on, right? Like I'm a, you know, Fannie Lou Hamer and the Angela Davises and you know the Sada Shakors and so on and so forth, right? And that means intersectionality, that means growth, constant growth, right? Like every day I wake up, I'm always trying to ask myself, how can I be better today? And I think that we don't necessarily have a society that always does that. And it's hard to, especially when a lot of people are trying to survive, right? It's hard to like growing is a part of thriving, right? And when you're trying
Right.
to thrive, it's hard to thrive, right? So, you know, I think that culminates all in this kind of like overarching umbrella of healthy masculinity, as you put it, right? Like, what does it look like every day to live with the privilege of being a cishet Black man? And I'm almost 6'3", right? I'm like 240 pounds. Like, so I'm not just a cishet Black man. I'm also like a larger Black man, and what that means to society, both in terms of my privilege and my oppression. So, you know, a lot of people project their expectations on what a Black man is supposed to be, right? A lot of people project their expectations on what a Black man can and can't be. And I try to redefine all that at times, right? Like, it was funny. I was having lunch with somebody the other day, a friend of mine. And, you know, the second I was leaving, I was like, yo, I love you, bro. And he was just like, oh, what did I do? I was like, love you. Like, I was like, you know, because I love you, right? And he was just like, he was so taken aback by that. And I, you know, and we talked for a few minutes. And I was just like, we got to step out of not just toxic masculinity, but the confines of masculinity, right?
Right.
You know, how often do we hear women just like, oh, I love you, sis, this and that, and a third. I'm like, how do you feel after I said that? He's like, I feel good. I'm like, well, why are we not working to make each other feel good, right? Like, why are we have these shackles on masculinity? Like, it has to be defined by being like stoic and unemotional and hard and toxic, really. I mean, at the end of the
Right.
day.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's just the work that I'm doing of trying to just represent this masculinity that's not just progressive, I would say inclusive also, right? Not just emotional, but open, right? Like open to all sorts of communities, open to the idea that masculinity also can live in the same body as femininity as well, right? Just all these different things.
Right. Yeah. And so it's funny you brought that up, the I love you, because I drop my son off at school every morning and I make it an intention to tell him that, you know, before he leaves my care. But then as you were saying that, I was thinking, at what point in life does that stop? And then when we enter into these situations and you have two men share that, you know, that message and statement to one another, then it's like should
Right.
it's like a gift that you don't know if you should accept.
Right.
You know, someone just surprisingly says, I love you, man. You're like,
right. But people don't realize when you exist in that way, it makes you not even just it starts corroding you. It erodes your entire being, your body, your soul, your mind, because love is the thing that fortifies us. And I don't think that people understand that, right? Like love, when everything else is falling apart, love and hope are the two things that we actually still have regardless, right? Like hope is what got Black people from the fields to today, right? And hope is just going to get us going forward from here, right? And love is the thing, like I said, that fortifies us to make that hope a reality. Hope is the dream. Love is the action, right? And I feel like men, we pull ourselves away from that so much that we're not even a whole person anymore by the end of it, right? Like, to another example, I had a conversation with my uncle one day, and I was crying. I just started crying. I was talking about something he had did for me when I was younger. He said, "Boy, why are you crying?" And I was like, "What's the problem?" He's like, you a grown man. What you crying over that for? And I was like, "Why are you so angry about me crying?" I was like, "I'm crying because the amount of emotion that has swelled up in me from that moment means something to me." And he was so like legitimately angry. He thought that he said, "Well, if you keep on crying, everybody else is gonna think you're soft. I don't have a soft nephew." And I said, "No, if I keep on crying, I'm gonna let out the things that make me stronger, right? All those tears wash over me like armor." And that's what I need people to understand. Reimagine what your tears, your emotions, what your pain, your joy does for you. It makes you an actual human being, when legitimately, like, patriarchal structures want us to be less than a human being.
You preaching today, man. You know, I'm gonna have to back up and just let you take it on.
We're talking about it,
Right.
This is this is what it really is,
Yeah, that's real. So you brought up, and I don't want to like change subject because that's very deep into like our makeup, right? And if we're continuing to be afraid to enter into that space, we never, as you were saying, become our full selves or present our full selves in society. You mentioned your uncle. I'm not sure if he falls into this environment or community that I'm about to mention. But thinking about, your upbringing and your experiences throughout life, who've been your role models, right? And how have they shaped, the definition of Frederick Joseph?
It's interesting. Most of my role models have been Black women. And that's, we have a society in which Black women have, for the most part, been the backbone of our progress, whether that's progress for Black people or progress as just all the progressive aspects of society have, for the most part, been led by Black women. But, when I think about role models, I guess in the context of this conversation, I want to think about men for a second, because I think the reality is I didn't have many, right? I didn't have many role models. I was a kid who loved show tunes and Broadway. I love hip hop too, but I love football as much as I loved ballet. But because I was so stuck in these toxic confines of what my role models, the men in my life, wanted me to be, I was like, okay, let me just play football and hit people, right? And on the low, I'm going to Swan Lake. Let me go see Swan Lake on the low, not talking about. Right? So when I look back on it, I don't think I had role models as much as I had people who were arbiters of like who I could be and who I couldn't be. And I've been honest about that with the men in my life. Like, I said that I don't want to be that type of father or uncle or godfather or husband or whatever. And I think that the reality is that they had the same thing, right? Like, there's a through line in the ways in which patriarchy and toxic masculinity have impacted, especially Black and brown men, since the inception of this country until now, right? The more toxic we are, the less we have to give to our families, right? The less we have to give to our communities and things of that nature, right? Like, I think about the toxicity of these young men that just killed the rapper in Memphis, Young Dolph, right? Someone who was a father taking care of his kids, so on and so forth. That was a groundswell, I'm sure, of all these different toxic beliefs and experiences, right? When these young men are fighting, when these young men are deciding that they can't cry or not be romantic or whatever it might be, or even, being abusive towards the women and the people in their lives, that has a through line, like I said, from the beginning and the inception of this country. They want us to be that, right? The most progressive thing, the most pro-Black, pro-brown, pro-whatever thing you can be is a healthy masculine person. It's the most healthy and progressive thing that you could possibly be in your life.
So whenever that word, when healthy masculinity comes up, right, I always think, okay, what is the formula that creates that, right? Because there's one side of it that you show, right? It's on display, but what things are being put together to make that, a reality, right? Because in our mind, theoretically, you're like, oh, you're not misogynistic, you're respectful, you're right. So these are ideas, and I'm pretty sure I'll have to, pull out my stack of books because I know it's somewhere in there. There's some pieces of that. But if you could, like, in short, think about like what pulls that together, that idea of healthy masculinity, what would that be in your eyes?
I think for me, it's the constant work of unpacking and unlearning, right? If you've spent your entire life being told one thing, you have to actively unpack why you've been told that thing and unlearn that thing, make space for something new, right? So like, I never say to anybody as an example that I'm a womanist or I'm a feminist. I always say I'm in training, right? And I'll be in training until the day I'm 6 feet deep, because I can't, the ego and the narcissism that it would take to just suddenly, hey, I'm no longer misogynist, right? Like I'm a feminist. Nah, I want to always be in training, because if I'm always in training, that means that I always have something more to learn, right?
Right.
So I think that just that standpoint for people is important. I think the other thing for me is like inclusivity, right? Like I think inclusivity is at the very core of what it takes to be a healthy masculine person, right? You look at what's happening right now, the conversations around the trans community, right? And a lot of those conversations, people like Dave Chappelle, like, oh, they're trying to cancel me, which has been very interesting to watch. As a Black man watching another Black man kind of exist in this way, because I'm like, well, from my understanding, especially because I know a lot of people in the trans community who have huge platforms and access and things like that, I'm like, well, a lot of them have said, hey, can we sit down and have a conversation so that I can inform you as to how you are harming me, right? And Dave's toxic masculinity has not allowed him to be inclusive of these voices to where he can evolve, right? And I think that that's one of the most defining traits of toxic masculinity, someone, again, who's not willing to evolve or listen and learn, right? So if you're going to actually try to get it right, that takes you understanding that you might not be getting it right, right?
Yeah.
And having the courage, having the legitimate courage. To keep on doing the same thing over and over don't take no courage. To do something new that ends up being better and more beneficial for others around you, that takes real courage. So I think that another defining trait of toxic masculinity is being a coward.
So you said transformation requires courage is why I was pulling. Yep. I got a new equation. I like math. So there we go. That works. And you brought up the incidents of yesterday. And so I wanted to kind of put this in perspective for some of our, those who are watching us or listening in. A lot of negative things taking place in our world daily. Like, what is giving you hope right now? And you talked about hope earlier, when we're talking about love, right? But what is giving you hope right now?
I think I get hope from young people, right? I get hope from young people, and also seeing the evolution of people in my own life from what they used to be. And sometimes for me, that's even looking in the mirror, right? Like I speak very candidly in my debut adult book, my next book, Patriarchy Blues. When I was young, I was molested from the time I was 8 to 10 years old, right? As a young boy, I was molested by my babysitter, a middle-aged woman, and I kept it secret. I actually, the first time I talk about it publicly is in this book. And what that did to me was, it made me hate women. It legitimately made me hate women. I had this duality of being raised in a household without many males and things like that. My father wasn't around. So I had this duality of like my mother and my grandmother and all these women are the women who were raising me and protecting me. And also like in secret, this woman's, stealing my essence, right? Like she's stealing my body from me. She's like, it's like little cuts constantly inflicted in me over years. And what gives me hope is that at some point I was able to unpack that. I was able to unpack that and hold myself accountable, because, one of the things I say in the book is that the emptiness that I had inside of me, I tried to fill with parts of other women over my life, right? So I, from the time I was 10 years old when that stopped until the time I was, damn near 30, I was just attempting to steal from women because I hated them. Right? I was trying to take their pieces and put them in these places in my heart that was damaged. And at some point, I had to stop myself. And it was around the time I met my fiance, and I had to say to myself, you got to grow, bro. You got to grow. If you actually want to be the man for this woman, you don't want to, because what you're being a womanizer, you're being a misogynist and all these different things. And that gives me hope that if I was able to unpack that and heal and grow and try to get to this place now where I'm helping others heal and grow, I think that anybody can do it.
And but my lead up or follow up to that was, how do you encourage others to stay hopeful, to be the change? But I guess you started to talk about that a little bit towards your end. So no, thanks for sharing that. Next thing I want to know about you, right? Or not just me, the public, if you will, right? So they may not know how accomplished you are, right? So you've name dropped a few pieces of work you're working on, or soon to be released book, and some who have participated in a diversity series prior may have heard you earlier last year, when you came to speak. So what's one thing that public perception may have right about you, and what's something they may have wrong? And some people may just be meeting you today, and so you have the chance to like clean the slate and be like, this is who I am. No.
I think what public perception would have right is, I'm trying, right? I'm imperfect. I'm trying my best. I get a lot of things wrong. I get some of them right. But anybody who can look at me, look at my platform, read my work, whatever it is, and say, oh, he's trying to get it right. He's trying to get it right. He's trying to do good in this world. Then I would say, yes, that's true. In terms of, what people don't understand, and if I could like clear the air, I suppose. And I won't, I don't even think it's just about me. I would say like anybody who kind of exists in any public consciousness at any points, people are people, right? I think a lot of times people will see, let's say a tweet or something like that, and be like, oh, he got 80,000 likes on a tweet. I'm gonna say this and that and the third about him, or I'm gonna say this, whatever it is. I'm like, behind all these things, I'm actually like a real person, right? Like I'm somebody's son, I'm somebody's grandson, I'm somebody's cousin. I'm not just the vessel of the political and social beliefs that exist within this country. And I think that's important to say, because being human means I get a lot of things wrong, right? Like, being human, a lot of people, I tell people all the time, people are like, oh, Fred always gets it right. Fred just always, a lot of people who follow me like, oh man, he just always hits. And I'm like, look, I had to sit down for 15 hours and think about how I was going to respond to this, right? Like, right. And social media kind of gives you that opportunity. Writing, my next book, Patriarchy Blues, I was saying stuff in it as I was writing. I was like, that's a little problematic, right? And I had to go back, but like, I'm human, right? So I would just say that clears the air. Like, I want to be imperfect, right? I'm trying to grow, like I said. So, yeah.
Right. You present yourself as this perfect being. No one is really like, Right. Like he's not real, he's not authentic, right? But you let them know, like, I'm human, I'm going to trip, I may have to go back and edit something and say, please understand this is what I meant,
right.
For them to understand, like, you mentioned an individual earlier who has a very large platform, I don't need to say his name, who has an opportunity to kind of edit and clear the air and make people understand what it is that he's trying to say. So there it is.
Right. And that's the work, brother. I think that, and again, I like telling people that. I'm like, look, they'd be like, oh man, he's getting it right about transphobia and homophobia, misogyny, and this and that and the third, and blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you the truth. I'm not. Like, I'll say something and I'll have somebody around me be like, hey, Fred, you can't, that wasn't okay. I'm like, you're right. Like,
yeah.
So like we present in this other way, but it's not true, right? Like we're all just human.
Right. And it's important to have those folks around you, right? So because if you have a lot of yes people or folks who are just, I hear like people like, oh, be a fly on the wall, right? Was like be the fly that comes and be like, like to like make me straighten up,
Right,
or think
right.
think again of like, wait a minute, what is around me that's not right?
Right.
That's attracting, that response. So
yeah, I think that's important for men, especially who are trying to grow out of toxic masculinity, right? Like a lot of, I think that younger generations are seemingly getting a little better than we were. There's much more conversations about identity, much more conversations about consent and things of that nature. But the reality again is like you need people to pour into you, right? Like I've had to rebuild my nucleus, right? Like all my guys I grew up with, we were all similar, right? Like all saying the same things, doing the same things, being problematic. So I had to make friends outside of my bubble, right? I had to make friends who actually are like I ask people all the time when people have an opinion, let's say on like transphobia, I said, well, do you have any trans friends? Right? And people are typically 9.9 times out of 10 actually. People like, I don't. I'm like, so you have an opinion on a community, but you don't know anybody in that community, right? Like, and how would that sound when we talk about it in regards to other things? Like you ask a black person to ask a white person after the white person said, I don't even know any black people. They're like, oh, that's problematic, this and that third. So why does the same not apply when you're talking to, let's say, a man about his opinions on the gay community, the trans community, so on and so forth, right?
There you have it. There's some more equations for our folks that's listening outside our. Those who are sitting around in the empty seats of the barbershop. They're like, yep. I need to be inclusive, right?
Right.
I need to bring some more people into my bubble, so that we're able to share and learn from one another and not just have these kind of this tunnel vision, or opinions, right?
Yeah. And then learn to shut up, right? I think that's. I was gonna say, like, and learn to be quiet, right? I think that's not just a problem with, I think a lot of cishet men. I think a lot of cishet men have been in power so long because of patriarchy, whether it's power on a societal level or power in a familial level in their household, so on and so forth, that a lot of us don't know when to just be quiet, right? Be quiet, listen, learn something. And I think that was one of the most important things I ever did. And, my mother kind of put that in me from being young, she slapped me. Shut up. So.
This matter does not concern you. You're right. Like, oh, okay.
Right, exactly. Just listen, grow. You don't have to inject yourself in everything, right? Like you can just, being an accomplice or a co-conspirator with a community you don't belong to is not about taking up space. It's about providing more space and getting out the way so people have said space. Right. That's it.
So another, I've come about learning like what inclusivity means, over the past few years, like really learning it, right? So I may have been doing it a little, but as you're sharing it, I'm hope like, as people are listening to really broaden that perspective of that it's not just, bringing people along or opening your door, right? But helping people to understand they can open their doors up too,
right?
To have others, because the larger and more diverse the community is, the richer we can become in learning from one another. Right.
And it's interesting. I don't want to use this person as another example, but like a comedian was saying, something to the effect of like, oh, well, this community might be oppressed, but I'm Black, right? And Black people more oppressed than anybody. And my immediate thing was like, well, you do know that there are people who are, there are women who are Black, and there's also people in the LGBTQ plus community who are also Black. So now think about it. If you're oppressed and you're Black, they too are Black, and also you're oppressing them as well. That means math, right? So right, exactly. So that would equal them being more oppressed than you, right? So like at that point, you have, if you actually care, you'll do something about it. If you're actually pro-Black, being pro-Black, in my opinion, means freeing and liberating all Black people, not just some Black people, right? And that's the same thing for every community. So, I think that's deeply, deeply important, is when you are trying to create change, that your change is systemic across a spectrum of human beings as opposed to just one group. Because I think another thing people don't realize, if anybody is in shackles, right? And I mean that metaphorically, if anyone's in shackles, it doesn't matter who it is, then those shackles could just as easily be taken off of them and put on you. So the goal is not to not be shackled and have somebody else be shackled. The goal is for the shackles to no longer exist. Right. And that's what people don't understand.
Yeah. I'm very visual. So as you're speaking, like, I wish I had a paintbrush over here, because I'm like, look, until we're all free, none of us are free, right?
Free up. Not a singular one of us.
I was thinking that statement, I can't remember where I heard it from. Maybe it's Robin Hood, right? One for all and all for one. Yeah. And so it's thinking like, until we are all positioning ourselves to be without oppression, all of us are potentially going to face oppression or be in that conversation, if you will.
Right. And the goal, again, of systemic oppression is to keep people separated, right? Like, how are we supposed to be, and this is specific to the Black community right now, like, how are we supposed to be combating these destructive and violent systems when we're manifesting that same destruction and violence in, let's say, how we treat our women, right? It doesn't make any sense. You're going to fight. I'm supposed to go out here and let's say fight for, us to not have any more George Floyds. And that's why it's important to equally fight for Breonna Taylor. But then you have to also fight for the Breonna Taylor in your life who is not being violently accosted by the police, but rather violently accosted by you, right? And that's what people don't understand. You can be, just because you're oppressed doesn't mean that you're not also an oppressor, right? And people have to start reframing that. You can be oppressed and be oppressive.
There you go. You're preaching it. I didn't have anything to say. I was just going to throw my hand up.
I don't know. I guess, like I said, I was just looking forward to this conversation because this for me is the most important work right now, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has their things. I think everybody has their things to unpack and stuff like that. But it's just like, I think especially in the last few months, seeing high profile men spew just such toxicity, right? Like I even look at, I don't know if everyone's familiar with Lil Nas X. I love Lil Nas X, right? I think Lil Nas X is one of the most brilliant young artists of the day. And I've seen, as rappers have not only been frustrated with him, but been like verbally violent and like actually said they'll commit acts of violence against him, not because he's done anything to them, but rather just because he's gay. He's literally just gay. Like he's not, he has done nothing to no one except for be successful and gay, right? How is attacking that young man freeing anyone? How is it, like, how like, and this is why, again, this is such an important thing for us to be talking about actively, like, not just like, oh, don't be a bad guy, don't be a misogynist, don't be a homophobe, but rather, what is it accomplishing, right? What is your vitriol actually accomplishing? And it's nothing. It's holding us back.
More fear to cover up your own fear.
Yep.
You're
I'm not preaching. That's preaching. That's preaching. More fear to cover. Man, that's what I'm talking about. Yes.
But that's what it is. And I've heard that this conversation before, or a similar example. And I always try to get to like the root cause. Like what is it that is creating, these feelings or these ideas? And so to attack someone who is in your community, right, working towards the same goal to spread a message, through art, yet they're exemplifying something, one that you either don't understand, that you fear, or you're confused by, and you're too afraid to ask more questions to learn, right?
Mhm.
And so what do, right? You attack it, try to, make it go away or get other people to think like you, which then you're just instilling more fear
Right, right,
and the
right,
cycle,
right.
right?
Right. You're right. It is a cycle. It is the I've likened it before to you ever get, I don't know if you have pets, but for anybody on here who does have any pets, especially cats. I used to be a big cat person. And when if you rescue a cat, or if you even get a newborn kitten or whatever, and you bring them home for the first time, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll scurry somewhere so that they find like a safe spot. If they don't know you yet, they don't know this environment, and they're deathly afraid. Like they are literally deathly afraid. They don't, like, you're this big monstrosity in this big world that you've thrown them into. So they look for a place to calm down. And what people say, trainers and people who work with animals always say, like, don't bother them, show them where the food is, show them where the litter box is, let them come out on their own, so they can, become comfortable, whatever. And if you like press them too much, not only will they be fearful, but they will lash back at you, right? And I think that a lot of men have to understand that they are those kittens generationally, right? They've been thrown into this world, especially I think a lot of Black and brown men thrown into this world out of pain and anger. They are now lashing out, right? Like me lashing out was because I was molested, but like it's also what I saw in society, right? To be a strong Black man, you gotta this, you gotta that. So anybody who challenged that, I'm like, oh, you don't want me to be a strong Black man because you're trying to put me down, right? But that's all, again, by design, right? If you reframe it and see yourself as that kitten thrown into this world, you'd be like, okay, what I need to do is calm down, right? What I need to do is look inside and tell myself, I am safe. Now that I am safe, let me explore my environment and get to know things, right? Because that's what it took for me. I had to say to myself, especially as a kid, I grew up in an era where, like, I mean, we live in a very homophobic world, but I think, I don't know how old you are, but like I grew up, homophobia wasn't even a term when I was growing up. We were just homophobic. Nobody, and you weren't even, like, in ways that wasn't necessarily intended, right? And when I started trying to come out of some of that, I had to tell myself, these men, these women, these people existing as they exist as their true selves has nothing to do with you, and you are still yourself and you are safe. And if you are safe, once again, now you can start bringing them into your world and you can enter theirs in ways where you can create more safety for everybody, right? But we don't frame things like that. We don't frame things as, kind of the gentle kitten theory or whatever, right? We just, everybody wants to be this hard lion getting thrown into the wild. Yeah, everybody wants to be, there's nothing soft about me. I'm not scared of anything. I'll bite back, I'll claw, I'll scratch, I'll growl. I'm not afraid of nothing. But the second you reframe it, you ain't nothing but a kitten.
Right.
Nothing but a kitten.
Just trying to get some find your place and become comfortable within it. There was, again, painting the picture of your words. It's like every lion starts off as a kitten,
right?
And depending on which community, their pride teaches them the ways of the world. And if you have the wrong pride,
right? It's, you remember what is it, Native Son? Yeah. I think one of the most important books I've ever read, and I read it as a young person. I read it again when I was in grad school, kind of when I was trying to do some of this work of just like unpacking who I've been, because I think Bigger Thomas is arguably, for me at least, Bigger Thomas is the most important character ever written in history. And I think Bigger Thomas is a really important character for Black men, especially Black men who are looking at violence against women, right? Whether that's mental, emotional, or physical violence. Because a lot of the violence, without realizing it, that Black men are committing is a manifestation of the violence that they've received in these systems, right? Like Bigger Thomas was a character who had to deal with the full weight of a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist world, and the little bit of power that he had was over this Black woman, right? So how did he use that power? he used that power in the same way that power was used against him,
Right.
oppressively, right? Violently. And I think that, yeah, you know.
And so you say that, and I think of, again, I wish I need to learn to paint, or some device that brings what's in my mind to light. That image is what happens. A big part of toxic masculinity, right? A big part of how we've come to socialize with one another, right? So someone has to be the authoritarian in the space, as opposed to you coming in like, let's learn, let's be
right
in this space together. And we're also often you know, a reflection of, you know, our superiors, or those who raised us, right? And, you know, I'll say, thankfully, for my case and for many others, right, we have role models, or our parents instill good values within us, so that we don't reflect that too much. But then when society gets a hold of us, it kind of starts to, you know, I'll say, poison the well, right? And very important for us to, like, try to, you know, keep that from overpowering who we are.
Yeah, I mean, capitalism teaches us that everything has to be a competition, right? And if everything has to be a competition, that means that there are winners, losers, haves, have-nots, and that doesn't create this, right? There's no space for equality, let alone equity. But that's not true, right? There's actually enough in our systems and enough in our world for everybody, right? There's no need for the competition, whether it's between races, whether it's between genders, whether it's between ages, classes, so on and so forth. There's no need for competition. And that competition this false competition that we believe there has to be, again, that is what we have seen modeled, right? They're like, oh, well, you have to, like people who have wealth are like, well, these people must be poor for me to maintain my wealth, right? The same way a lot of people who are white supremacists are like, well, if Black and brown people have more, then white people will have less. That has never been the case. The same way a lot of men are like, well, if women have more, then I, as a man, am going to have less. And then again, that manifests that angst, that anger, anxiety, fear. It manifests directly into how we relate to each other. That is, you know, generations on generations of superiority complexes, right? Men being indoctrinated in a false ideology that unless they dominate women mentally, emotionally, and physically, then they will not just be less of a man, that they will somehow not have anything that they aspire to in the society, right? Like, oh, if I'm not putting my hands on this woman, she's going to disrespect me. And if she disrespects me, that makes me less of a man. And if I'm less of a man, my boss will never respect me. And I'm sure that my white boss is putting his hand on his woman too. And it's this cycle of falsehoods.
You just wrote a whole book right there, right? that spectrum you just shared there of, you know, causes, you know, or how people come to be off of a falsehood, right? So that one little lie or false idea turns into something where you're like, we can clear all this out if you remove that one nugget of falsehood, the rest of this you can understand and see, you know, a lot clearer.
Right. I mean, that's also how we, you know, outside of just, I mean, this is a manifestation of patriarchy and misogyny, but outside of everything I'm talking about in terms of, like, well, I guess it's still in this domination conversation, it's like how we get rape culture, right? We get rape culture because we don't teach young men, especially, that the answer no is okay, right? Because we have this false understanding of dominance and the necessity of dominance for you to be a quote unquote real man. A woman saying no to you in society is unacceptable, right? Anybody saying no to you is unacceptable, right? Oh, right. I have to get that job, or my coach is telling me to pass that ball, but no, I'm gonna take the shot. And in certain ways, it's always toxic in my personal opinion, but in certain ways it manifests violently, versus like, like I think it comes from a lot of different things, right? Like when we tell people, especially in business school, I went to business school, like, never take no for an answer, right? And I've always challenged them, like, well, sometimes the answer is just no. But if that's my psyche from even the business world, what's going to happen in my personal life when I'm just out at a bar and a woman and I have been, just chatting up, and I bought her a few drinks, and I'm like, hey, do you want to hang out sometime? She says no, but I've been taught my whole life, don't take no for an answer, right? And now we get rape culture because either I'm grabbing her arm, or I'm calling her the B word, or I'm this and that and the third, or in his worst case scenario, I'm actually manifesting like a next level of physical violence where you actually get someone being potentially raped, right? And these are the things we don't think about. We don't think about how these systems, and just even the language that we use of not teaching boys that no is okay, ends up being this through line to, the worst things that happen in our society to our women.
Yeah. Wow. You're definitely educating me, those who are watching, just to think of some things differently, right? That importance of that word, or that idea of no, just in that segment there. That was, you don't think about how impactful that is.
Yeah, I mean,
along the way.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, even if we look at girls, young girls are told no about things all the time, right? Like, oh no, like especially in patriarchal ways, no, you can't wear that because if you wear that, this and that and third. No, you can't do this. You can't go there. You can't this for your own safety. Da 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 da. But a boy is the trope of a boy is to be this wild, do what you want. You're cooler if you do what you want. Like you're edgy, push the limits, right? Like if life hands you a lemon, go make lemonade kind of thing. But we teach our girls, well, if life hands you a lemon, sometimes you just got a lemon, right? Like boys are supposed to run through a wall regardless, right? And that indoctrination of the differences in these two types of people gets us to where we are when they are adults, or when they're even just kids, right? The boys will be boys, and this and that and the third is all because there is no for a boy. There is only a different way of accomplishing the same goal.
Right. Well, no, thank you so much for that. I hate to close up. This has been a very enriching conversation, and I'm sure we'll find a way to reconnect and continue this somehow. But we have about 5 minutes left. I do have one pressing question to ask before we go, right? So get ready for this one. Right? On a both personal and public level, what legacy do you want to leave behind for others?
Ooh, damn. That's a hell of a question. Oh boy. I would say a legacy of progress, right? I don't think in my lifetime we'll see a change that's night and day. I don't think in my kids' lifetime and their kids. But as long as each generation we keep moving forward, that's what matters to me. So if I can play a small part in that, right? Like if I can have this conversation with the people on here, and somebody says, oh, you know what? I need to reframe the things that I tell my son, right? I need to reframe the things that I tell whomever. That means something to me. And if that's my legacy, if somebody remembers my name simply for the fact that like he made me reimagine how I was thinking about some things, then that's what matters to me. All we have is our name. All we have is our name. Make it mean something.
With that, Frederick, Joseph, thank you so much for sharing your story today, for giving us a lot of insight on who you are, how you've become the person you are today. And it's been a real pleasure, to be in this space with you. As excited as I was to host this conversation, I think we, accomplished a lot and got to learn a little bit more about you. So extreme and sincere thank you, brother. And I look forward to your forthcoming book. I'll have to get a copy so I can check it out and learn a little bit more about you, but also use that as inspiration for some others that I come in contact with, to be like, here's this brother's story. Here's yet another one who shows us there's more to come.
Really appreciate
So
it. And just thank you for being you, because this space is a safe space for growth. And the rumors of how amazing you are, they don't do justice, man. They don't do justice. I'm looking forward to staying connected, and any way that I could be of service to you and the entire team over there. Please just let me know. You're amazing. All y'all are amazing. It's truly been an honor.
that's huge. Thank you very much. And for those that watching, you can check out the Heart of a Man webpage for more information and upcoming events that we have. Thank you all again. Frederick, have a great day.
Thank you.